All right. Well, welcome everyone. Officially, welcome again to Aligning Your Study. We have seen an inordinate amount of learners coming to us and their studies aren't aligned. And all they tell us is, my chair is telling me that my study is not aligned.
Yeah.
And so our first question is, where are you not aligned? And they will go, I don't know, I'm just writing some more. I'm writing more and more and more. And the more you write, the more misaligned your study gets. Be sure to go ahead and mute yourselves if you would, please. So today we thought, well, let's just bring in a seminar and I'll do my best to make sure that you know there are many places that you could be misaligned. So one of the biggest things I'd like for you to take away from this today is you're going to have to ask your chair, where am I misaligned? Help me understand where I'm misaligned because I don't see it. Because sometimes you just don't know what to ask when you ask. So let me introduce myself. I'm Dr. Lori Wieters. I am a chair. Oh, hang on a minute. I'm a chair for Grand Canyon University. I also see a lot of different studies coming through the e-dissertation collaborative information or site that we have. We have people from all over the world. Probably 80% are Grand Canyon University students, and the other 20% are from all kinds of places and all kinds of universities. So we're starting to see a lot of universities that have like a checklist. This is what you need in your dissertation. We have the ability to use a template at Grand Canyon University. So there's a lot of different things that I see that many of you don't. And I have been a doctoral faculty member since 2010. I teach in residency, and I also do a lot of coaching for students. So I have I think a pretty wide awareness of what's going on in the dissertation world. So I'm excited that you're here today. We are going to hopefully align your study. What you might want to do is get out your study. And it's going to be hard to see because I've got most of your screen, but some of you have some of it printed out. You might have your 10 points you want to look at today, because by the end of this, hopefully we'll have a little bit of time for us to go through the process of actually answering your questions and making sure that by the time you walk out, you at least know where to ask your chair about your study. We can use a chat feature. I've asked Dr. Hazy to monitor it. So if you've got a question, please post it there. And then we'll go ahead and answer from there. And then at the end again, we'll make sure we open up for more questions. Please note, we are recording the session. I already said that once, but I will tell you again. So, and we are going to post it. So please be aware of that. All right, we're going to dig in here to aligning your study. I've been a residency instructor for probably 10 years, 9 or 10 years. So I've seen, I'm going to say probably 1,000 studies or more. And 1,000 studies or more says, I've seen alignment, I've seen misalignment. I've taught in the Grand Canyon University, I've taught in the first residency, which is you're just trying to put it together. Your second residency, which is supposed to be focused on data collection, data analysis, and any of your final components there. And then I've also put together both quantitative and qualitative studies. My recent graduate rate right now is about 14. I've got 4 more to graduate this year. So hopefully by the end of the year, if I get lucky, somebody will pop in and help me to get to 20. So that's my goal. That's my stretch goal this year. And I participate on content as a content committee member. However, I don't do a lot of that right now because I'm pretty full. So just so you know, but I can typically get you to someone if you do need a content expert. And we just had a couple folks graduate and then get on the content committee list. So very exciting about that. People wanted to come back and help. Okay, today's objectives. Just define dissertation study alignment. It's the quote, air quote word alignment. So we're going to define it, what it means. We're going to describe some of the pitfalls to an aligned dissertation studies. And we're going to help you to be able to identify the difference between an aligned study and one that's not. So you all will be working in this process, and we're going to critique existing alignment in a study, and then we're going to create an aligned study. Hopefully it's yours as you look forward to what you need to do to make sure your study is aligned. If there's any other objectives you have, please note those in any other objectives you have today or questions you have, just put those in the chat feature there. And then if you have additional seminars that you think would be great, just let us know that too. Okay, so dissertation alignment. It's one of the most important concepts in the dissertation process, y'all. If it's not aligned, you can't finish it. So we want to make sure that we all have aligned studies. Each section should be focused on the same specific point. So you shouldn't have, I had a learner who didn't like the fact that their dissertation alignment was repetitive, so they changed the order of the variables, which changed the whole study. So just be okay with the fact that there's going to be redundancy throughout here, and redundancy says alignment. So make sure you do that. Creativity is not your friend in this process. You have to start with a problem that's worthy of doctoral research. Most of the time, what I find in residency, most of the learners come in with a passion project. And that passion project turns into a lot of biased statements. I just know because of my experience that X, Y, and Z is going to turn out like this. And I'm so excited that I'm going to be able to prove it. If you get in that space, we're going to tell you to start all over. So you could have a problem with alignment because of you're passionate about something. Now, if you want to be known for something at the end of the doctoral process, then you have to approach it very objectively. And if you do have a lot of bias around it, we're probably going to ask you to go quantitative. Quantitative is a little bit more, if you will, objective. It's not always, because you can create anything from data. So make sure that we start with a problem that's worthy of doctoral research. It should be big enough for a study, but small enough to get done. And that is the tension. Many learners come in and they want to solve world peace. And we want you to do the postage stamp related to world peace. So please be open to the process. We see from beginning to end what this looks like for you. And we may say, I know you want to be known for this at the end of the day, but let's look at a little piece of this that you can add on and make your life work. Now, if you do want to make it your life work, you're probably going to tack on anywhere between 6 months and a year to your process, maybe 2 years. We've had folks come through that wanted to write a book. So they did a narrative study, which is a lot more writing. And in the narrative study, they took that information, they converted it into a book, and they were okay because the book would have taken them another year or so to do it. And they wanted to be guided in the process. So it's going to be up to you, but we will tell you, and I will tell you if you're in my residency, or if you're, if I'm helping you at all in any way, shape, or form, I'm going to tell you that most dissertation processes in most universities that offer expedited and quicker dissertation, if you will, than the 5 to 10 years in a traditional industry, it's gonna add time to the end. It may add a year to the end. So just be really careful with what you're looking at and what you're studying. So alignment can be off there. Alignment is about focus and consistency. It is about redundancy. Please, please, please understand that. Your problem statement looks like your purpose statement, which looks like your research questions, which is aligned to your theoretical foundation in your literature. There's just no way around it. Your dissertation is a logical progression of ideas between all of the elements of your dissertation, or there's a logical progression of your ideas. We just want to make sure that's happening. All right. Okay, let's look at misalignment. This is why it's super important for you to ask your committee members, your chair, about where is my study misaligned. It could be in the theoretical foundation, the problem statement, the purpose statement, and the research questions. Those are basically the bones of your study. We'll show you more about that here in just a few minutes, but there could be some misalignment just in the initial setup of your study. There are different types of universities that offer different types of help in these sections. Like I said in the beginning, some universities just have a checklist. Other universities have a full-on rubric template. So it depends on the university that you're in and whether or not and how these things are set up. There could be a misalignment in the methodology, qualitative, quantitative, and whatever the appropriate design is for your study. A lot of folks I hear who are doing qualitative say, I don't want to do numbers, so I don't want to do quantitative. But they have two instruments. Their literature shows that quantitative studies should be done. So sometimes you don't have a choice. So it's really important to understand that the methodology could be off because of your want. And unfortunately, you don't have much of a voice in your study until chapter 5. So you have to let the literature guide you. You have to let the information that you're getting and gathering on how you need to approach the study, not how you want. If you get into any of your defense conversations and you say, I went qualitative because it's easier, it's not easier. It's actually much longer process in the data analysis section. Quantitative is a little bit more difficult to set up front and easier to do in the back. So none of it's easy. So when you attach the word easy to the dissertation process, it's like having jumbo shrimp. It's just not going to be easy. So the literature that supports the need for your study may be off. Maybe some of the literature that you're trying to make wedge into your study is not appropriate for your study. Well, I've read so much on X, Y, and Z. I really want to use that literature. Well, maybe you can use parts of it in your literature review, but guess what? It may not support the need for your study. Many universities use the word gap, but a lot of our learners thought gap was an absence of something. A gap is typically, what is the literature calling for? What is the need for your study? So a lot of universities are getting away from the word gap and really looking at what is the literature saying and how do I need to approach this study? And is it too big? If you're writing and writing and writing, it's probably your study is too big. We need to get it down to a postage stamp. The language in the study, qualitative versus quantitative, they both have very unique language. And you don't want to get those mixed up. So explore and influence, we see a lot in your qualitative world. Impact, affect, correlate, and predict. Make sure you write this down because this will be very important to where we're headed today, is the language in your study can cause you to become misaligned. Misinterpreting the literature. So maybe you have some poor synthesizing methods in your writing, or your paraphrasing's off. You want to fit this study because it's so close to what you're doing, but not quite. And you want to paraphrase someone's information into your study, could create misalignment. And just know that a lot of the AQR reviewers take your references and they copy paste them into Google to see how you paraphrased what the information is by that author that you're citing. And they may say, oh, these are false citations, or these are not good citations. The author never said this, or the learner's not reading the studies. They're only grabbing information out of the abstract and putting it into the study. So, horror story, I had a learner who was having a struggle with paraphrasing because English was a second language. And so in that, when we got to AQR, I checked probably 30 or 40 of his references, but then the AQR reviewer checked a whole bunch more. And then he had to go back and put page numbers behind each one of his references. And that's 10, 15 hours of work. And then rephrase things that weren't phrased appropriately. Now, it's not wrong to put your page numbers into your proposal. A lot of us are telling our students to do that. Put the page number where you found that information so that it can easily be found by others. Your study's probably going to be touched by 15, 20, 30 people by the time we're all done with it. So if everybody's clear on where it is, and then when it's published, you can take the page numbers out. But it's not wrong in APA 7 to put page numbers in. So that might create a situation where this doesn't occur for you. Population, target, population, and sample. There is no sample population. So if you're looking, your population might cause you to be in misalignment with your target population and sample. Your surveys and questionnaires may not be aligned to your research questions. Interview focus group questions may not be appropriate to collect the answers to your research questions. Remember, you're always trying to answer the research questions that you posed in this. And data collection and data analysis procedures. You could have the wrong data collection and you could have the wrong data analysis procedures. Is anybody surprised by this? What else have you seen? Has anybody seen anything else that I missed? Yes, and Grand Canyon, by the way, uses the term problem space instead of gap. They've widened it so learners can really develop why they're doing this study. So it's still an anomaly to many of us trying to put those together. Okay, let's keep stepping forward. This is why, because you could be misaligned in any of these areas. This is why I put that big underlined comment at the bottom. What should you do when your committee member puts a comment on your document that's your study is misaligned? The first thing you should do is say where. Help me understand where and why. Just don't start writing again. Any other questions before we move on? Good. All right. Okay, here's a sample of a study. And this is aligning the core components. So theoretical foundation or foundations, depending on what it is, problem statement, purpose statement, and research questions. These are the bones, I call it, of your dissertation. So this study is a qualitative descriptive study, and you can tell that by the purpose statement. So your purpose statement really begins to put together what direction the study's going. And it has all the components in it. So for this study, the learner is using Maslach burnout theory. If you don't have a theoretical foundation, you don't have a study. So you need to have a strong theoretical foundation. GCU and many universities out there do not let students come in and just do a bunch of surveys and then create a new model, because that takes years and years and years. And so if you're doing it in the expedited manner, then in 3 years and 4 months or whatever it is, then you want to make sure that you work within the construct of that. My example is when I teach how to write your dissertation, we talk about the university's ability to put all of their chairs, all of their methodologists, all of the content folks through training. So we all know how to do it the same way. And so therefore we're standing on either side of your conveyor belt and watching the studies go across. They're personalized by what you want to accomplish. But we know when we see a certain type of study, we know how to approach it. And so you don't want to fall off the conveyor belt by trying to solve world peace. So in this case, this person's looking at Maslach's burnout theory. There are 3 components to the theory. There are emotional exhaustion, depersonalization, and reduced personal accomplishment. Now, when you're looking at the study, when you're looking at the theoretical foundation, you will notice it also has an instrument. So it's got a quantitative instrument that could be used for a qualitative descriptive study, but it has to align to your research questions. And so you can do that, or you can do just purely a qualitative study and do interviews and focus groups to capture data along the lines of burnout, including emotional exhaustion, depersonalization, and reduced personal accomplishment. Here's your problem statement. It is not known how. How is the indicator that this is a qualitative study? And then in this case, we're going to insert our sample. You might have, how do teachers do it? How do counselors do it? How do call center representatives do it? Whatever your sample is, gets put in there. Describe, this is a qualitative descriptive, so you're describing something. You're describing a phenomena, the influence of burnout in their role. And there might be something behind it in their ability to service their customers, in their whatever. I've just made this very simple so you can see what alignment looks like. The purpose statement, the purpose of this qualitative descriptive study is to explore how. You're going to insert your sample, and you're going to notice that after how comes your problem statement. Describe the influence of burnout in their role and includes Southern California. So many universities do it a bit different. This is the way that I work. So just know that as you look, if you're with another university, as you look at this, you're going to want to look at it in context of that. But what you can see from here is the theoretical foundation is embedded in the problem statement and is embedded in the purpose statement. We've added the purpose at the front of the purpose statement and the location at the back. Now, let's come down to the research questions. There are some universities that want you to restate the problem statement in the form of a question. It helps the student to collect information that may not be aligned to the theory. So most of the time we insert, and the numbering on these is different. So as you go through, your different phases of review. You might have RQ1 is the restatement of your problem statement, or in some cases, people put RQ0. And then you have RQ1. And the biggest thing I think you're going to notice is how each component of the theoretical foundation is now embedded in the questions. So as you're looking at this, now, organizational, I got a question here I want to address. When you're doing an organizational leadership definition, don't you have to include some of the leadership or emphasis in your study? Yes, in your study, the importance of your study, the justification for your study, your lit review has to address leadership. And most of the time, what you're going to look at here is, as you're writing the other components, you're going to be able to say the significance of this study is that it's going to help the leaders define the areas of burnout and be able to address those as an organization. So you do. Lynn asks, what is the minimum number of research questions? We don't ascribe to one, so more than one, but I can't tell you. We'll see here in just a minute where theoretical foundations might have more than 3 components, 3 elements, or may have several scales, and maybe the scale has several subscales, and maybe you need more or less. There's not a right answer for that. Your study is going to require the number of research questions. I don't want anybody to get freaked out about the research questions. Your research questions really come to play in chapter 4. In chapter 4, you're going to have to be writing on how you answered each one of the research questions. It is easier for novice researchers to have more research questions because that section becomes more focused. If you're writing in chapter 4 and you only have 2, there could be 2 here. How do our sample describe the influence of burnout in their role? And then we could have, how do our sample describe the influence of the components of burnout in their role? But the likelihood that you will miss, you will have to rewrite chapter 4 is going to be pretty high, because you're going to be just writing and writing and writing with the second research question versus it being very focused on what data you collected and then how it aligned to each one, how the theory, if you will, showed up in your study. And if your theory didn't show up, then you have that overarching or restatement of the problem statement that will help you to add any what we call inductive or emerging information that comes out of your data collection. I know this may be a lot, especially if you're new, but we will post this again so you can watch this again. Any more questions that I need to answer, Dr. Hazy?
Well, one more just popped up, Dr. Weaves.
I got the minimum number of research questions. So that is where the alignment of research questions in the theory. Yep, absolutely, Lynn. If your study doesn't look like this, then it's not aligned. And there's a lot of copy paste that goes on in when I'm working with learners. So you're going to write your problem statement. We'll get that right. Then we'll copy paste it into your purpose statement. And then we're going to copy paste it into each one of your research questions. Copy paste is your friend. You never thought that something you learned way early on was going to be super helpful. Okay, let's do a quantitative one. We're going to use the same scale. Now you're going to see here how you can turn a study qualitative or a study quantitative, depending on your need for the study. So here's your theoretical foundation. Again, we're using the Maslow burnout quantitative scale. We already know it's got 3 components, right? And we're going to use Mobley's turnover intention. So we're adding a new problem statement. Problem statement is, okay, now hopefully you'll be able to see it here. It is not known if and to what extent. Some methodologists will have you put or and, or slash and or. Please don't, every methodologist has their preference. Every chair has their preference. So as long as you're using the two theories that you really want to use for your study, how you put it in here, as long as it's aligned, is okay. So we're going to use this format. It is not known if and to what extent burnout predicts turnover intention and then your sample in call center representatives, in your counselors, in your hospital nurses. So the reason in quantitative, and you'll see something here in just a minute, a lot of organizations, a lot of schools have gone into just a straight correlation, which means that it really doesn't matter if burnout comes first or turnover intention comes first. You might have a mixture of these also. I've just made this really simple, but if you're looking at this, it really doesn't make sense if we just put correlates to turnover intention, because turnover intention typically doesn't predict burnout. So the variables can't go either way. And so we're gonna put this into a predictive correlational study. So you see the problem statement and the purpose statement. The purpose of this quantitative predictive correlation study is to, and you're going to see a quantitative word, examine. There are so often when I'm looking at first residency or brand new learners to dissertation, I see the word explore there, or influence, or I guess explore is what I see most often. So is to explore. And that's qualitative versus quantitative. So remember, we talked about the language. So examine, you could put analyze there, you could put determine. There's things that you could add there, but we use the word examine. And then you're going to see the problem statement. So copy paste the problem statement in, and then where you're doing it in Southern California. All right, so if and to what extent is your first question, or you can start with to what extent, either one, does burnout predict turnover intention in our sample? Now, you'll see in subsequent slides where it's going to be really important for you to know your instruments. You have to take your instruments. You have to make sure you understand how they're measured. All of them come with usually a scholarly article that shows where the validity and reliability sits, because you got to know if Maslach burnout comes up to a sum score or an average score, and whether turnover intention also comes up to a sum score, a total score. That predicts your number of research questions you have. In this case, I made 2 research questions. I could have made 1, 2, 3, 4 research questions. So if and to what extent does burnout, because burnout comes to a total sum score, predict turnover intention? That's our first one. If neither come to a sum score, you wouldn't have this question. So you're going to have to work really closely with your chair or your residency instructor or whoever you're working with to determine what are the instruments saying, so I know how to set this up. And then we have the second research question: if and to what extent do the components of burnout, emotional exhaustion, depersonalization, reduced personal accomplishment, predict turnover intention in our sample? And then you add 3 hypotheses with this. I'm not here to teach quantitative. What I'm trying to show you is how alignment works.
Dr. Wieters, we do have a couple of questions when you are ready to.
Okay, let me
Let me try to get you to the right place. Nat asked how you would approach using more than one theory for qualitative research, how you would derive your research questions based on more than one example of theory, but in qualitative research.
Okay, there's a few ways that you can do that. If you're using two, let me go back up for a second. We could do up here, your theoretical foundations. We could use, it is not known how, blank, describe the influence of burnout on their employee engagement. There are employee engagement theoretical foundations, and then you would bring in both theoretical foundations into this problem statement. Now, unfortunately or fortunately, both the Maslow burnout theory and employee engagement have quantitative surveys. So you're really going to have to justify why you're going to be doing a qualitative study using those two instruments or those two theoretical constructs for your study. So it's really important that then you would build out your literature review and your problem space or your need for the study in a way that shows there's a ton of quantitative stuff, but everybody's calling for qualitative. And then we would set your study up a little bit different, but you could use two in a qualitative pretty easy.
Okay, the next question was from Erin, and it's not actually directly related to alignment, but you might be able to help quickly. She's challenged because she has a rather lengthy title for her study, and her chair has asked her to include her her sample, but she doesn't have enough words given the title of her study.
Yeah, you get 12. I always say that the title of your study should be last. It's one of the last things you do, but many people want it up front. So you have motivation, stereotype, threat, and success in the mature age university student in California. So the first thing I would ask you is, in California, is that important to your title, or is it important to your study?
It only was because they wanted me to talk about the sample. Yeah. And that's why, because Southern California doesn't fit.
Yeah. So that's probably what you're going to have to do. It's really interesting that success is a measure in there. I mean, I'm sure you had lots of information to.
Oh no, it's student success. So it's academic engagement, motivation, age-related stereotype, threat, and adjustment and student success. So it just, yeah, bringing it down. I've cut it down as much as I could.
Yeah, sometimes the shorter is better. You could just do student academic success : university student motivation, stereotype, threat, and stereotype, threat, and the university student, or something that would have changed it a little bit. But every chair is a little bit different, and every AQR reviewer is a little bit different. So I'm glad is that where you settled, Erin?
Well, this is actually, I'm not to my chair yet. I just, in each of my classes, I'm dinged on assignments because each person wants me to include it. And I'm like, where? And I can't cut out that you're required to have your variables in your title, and you're required to have your sample. So I did, but if it's not specific enough, you get dinged. But if it's too specific, then it's over. Thank goodness for hyphens counting as one word.
Yeah.
That's all I've got to say. But, okay, that's not for me.
All right, thanks. It's a conundrum for a lot of people, And the
Mhm.
best thing to do is go out and look at several studies that have been published recently and look and see how creative they got with the titling.
I appreciate it. Thank you both.
You're very welcome.
And Dr. Weeder,
Yeah.
Nat asked a question that I think others may encounter at times. Nat says that his chair and methodologist won't agree on whether or not his study is aligned. The chair says, yes, it is, and the methodologist says it is not. So he's asking for advice, or I'm sorry, Nat is asking for advice, not sure if it's he or she, regarding how to handle that situation.
So I always teach that you have to advocate for yourself. And so making sure that you know, and you're not letting them dictate it in a way, but that you know that if you look at a study and you look at it in this way, and we'll look at a couple more here in a minute, but if you look at it in this way and put it in your learner dissertation page or wherever you're communicating with your chair and your methodologist, and you put it in a way that is just like most of the time I just put title, theoretical foundation, problem statement, purpose statement, just in one big line in my, not in the 10 points table or this table or that table, just in a row on a Word document, and then copy paste it over into wherever you're communicating with your chair and committee, and then asking where it's misaligned. Because it's really important for you to advocate for yourself, that you visually see it's aligned, or your chair says it is, or you can also ask for a meeting where your chair and your methodologist come together. A lot of us use PowerPoint to put each one of these concepts on. And if you put all of them on one PowerPoint per slide and walk through that with your methodologist and your chair, maybe there's something that's really small that's holding you up. So, because most of the time I find that learners don't know what to ask. And so they don't even know where to start when you think about misalignment. They just think that they're misaligned. Now I've got to figure this out on my own. And sometimes it might take all the committee members getting in the same room.
That's all the questions for now.
All right. Thank you so much, Dr. Hazy. Okay, it's your turn. You get to post in the chat room what's wrong with this qualitative study. And let's see if you can find it or them. There's a couple things, issues here. We can even talk about it if you want.
Right off the bat, impact language. Are we looking at quant or qual? Because it says qual. So the first thing is impact.
Yep, good catch. Good catch. How does that translate then into the purpose statement?
Influence of burnout in the role. So influence. So we're using the word influence. That's
examine. I see the word examine.
Examine.
What should it be?
Explore.
Impact is in there, but explore.
Yeah. So you're going to want to take impact out of the problem statement and add influence in order for it to align somewhat with the purpose statement. You're going to want to change the word examine out for explore. Good. You guys see, look how much you learned already, and I've only been through 3 slides. So.
And then do that all the way down, because impact is also in the research questions. So where you do it in one place, you better search it everywhere. And you can do that in Word, which is beautiful. So.
Thank you for that. So how easy is it for a learner to get sideways? in this example?
I mean, I think language is crucial, and I think the copy and paste part is so crucial. It's almost like you write it once and then you take the whole thing and you paste it and then you change it. Like for problem statement, purpose statement, you change it because you add the location. You change it, but you don't change the core components, I think is really key. And then language throughout the whole study. Like for instance, earlier you gave an example and I thought to myself, I know that some places in my chapter 2, I have written the word impact, not referring to my study, but just kind of referring to the significance and how my study can help describe what learners are going through. And I was like, oh my gosh, I'm going to go back and remove impact and use the word maybe influence, because I think that's a better descriptor. So thank you for that. And I went sideways that quickly with that one thing. So thank you.
I think it's a lot of us work every day in a different world. And all of a sudden we have to come into this scholarly world that has specific ideas and specific things and nuances and all this stuff. And the hardest thing I know I had a problem with, because I was a business person, I wrote training all the time. I did all these things, and when I had to come into this world, it was like putting me in a box and I just hated it. But it was a good practice. It was very good practice for me in what I do and how I do it. So we have to get our own self out of the way, to your point, and just do it. Whatever you want me to stand on my head, okay, I think this is right. Okay, I can show this is right through literature. I'm not going to have you tell me it's right. I'm going to go show you where it's right. Yes, it does. Who said that? Ooh. Does it matter that I have to look at some of the questions? Casey, yes, it does matter. Why does it matter? Casey, where are you?
I'm right here.
Oh, okay. What? Tell me.
I mean, it matters to me. I mean, because reduced personal accomplishment is different than the broad spectrum of personal accomplishment.
Yeah. Good. And then there's no identifier. So the influence, it's misaligned. It doesn't align with the other questions. What questions do you all have on this? Okay, that means I've either taught it really well or you guys are really quiet.
You taught it really well.
Oh, thank you for that. All right. Okay, we're gonna
Second that.
do what?
I've really enjoyed this morning. Thank you very much.
Oh, you're so welcome. All right, let's continue on here. What's wrong with this quantitative study?
It's using the word explore. Where did I see that? Looking at the purpose of this quantitative predictive correlation is to explore.
What
I
else
thought
is
we-
in that line that doesn't fit?
Is it predicts, is that correlational? Because I thought correlational was just associative. So, or like a relationship between them.
Yeah, it can be either one. There's two that are being used today, and that's associative. That means that it doesn't matter if your variable comes first or second.
Oh.
But if it does need to predict, then we need to put a prediction in there.
That makes sense. Thank you. Awesome.
Because we can't have turnover intention before burnout.
Should influence be in there or impact? Or
Well,
effect?
it should look like your problem statement. So the purpose of this quantitative predictive correlation study is to, and then copy paste your problem statement in. Examine if and to
Or
what extent burnout predicts turnover intention in your sample in Southern California. So it has to look exactly like that. So when you're looking at, well, this is for Grand Canyon University. Other universities do a little different structure. And as you go look at other university dissertation, you'll see that. But they teach this in a way that says the first part is to explore, examine, or determine, or whatever. And then paste your problem statement and then add the location. So that there's a formula to purpose statement.
Yeah, Aaron has noted in the chat section that influences really should be prediction.
Yep. So now you're starting to see this. So as you begin to look at your own work, go back just, you know, as Shannon did, and immediately knew, uh-oh, I've got some things that aren't all qualitative, that might be quantitative, or some qualitative in the quantitative studies. If that happens, then as a researcher out in the world, people are going to go, wow, that's not right, or they'll know that there's something wrong in the process here.
So
Okay.
can you address that real quick a little bit? Erin said that influences points to predictions. I think that's what that arrow means.
No, it means that instead of influences, it should be predicts. I apologize.
Oh,
I'm a statistics instructor, so I just, I
Awesome.
couldn't not say it.
Thank you. So it's okay to use influence in qualitative. I'm just, okay, good, okay.
Yeah, don't get confused. So you're probably loving this then, Erin.
Yeah, I have to say it's been a long time since I've taken qualitative courses, but yeah, the quantitative I'm all about.
Okay. Now, just let me point out that in the research question area, every chair, every methodologist, every chair wants you to number these differently, just as I pointed out the qualitative. So you might end up with one main question there, and then one question for emotional exhaustion, one question for depersonalization, and one question for reduced personal accomplishment. So you may do that, and then one hypothesis under each one. So you just have to go with the flow when they're talking about numbering. Don't get hung up on it. And you'll see studies that'll be the same way. So it's good. Any other questions? Got it? All right, just quick refresher. Qualitative, when you want to explore phenomenon, how and why. When your sample is small, when you want to write narratives, study phenomenological experiences, describe the phenomenon, or create a new theory. I mean, there's things that can happen in qualitative that take a longer time, but at the same time can lead to a really good outcome for you if that's what you want. And the language, explore, perceive, influence, describe, discover. Perceive is used in both because sometimes there's perception surveys, perception of burnout, perception of. So you'll see perception used or perceive used in both qual and quant. And then when you want to examine variable scales and subscales using surveys and databases, typically reported out in numbers, correlations, inferential statistics of some sort, have a large target population. And just because you only need 82 or 106, that means you're going to have to survey 400, 500, 600 people to get that number. So just be sure as you go down the path. Many universities are having you identify early whether you're doing qualitative or quantitative. And I always say, if you run into a hiccup and you can't get to your numbers, you may have to go qualitative. But now you know why quantitative wasn't appropriate for your study. Now that's kind of, for me, that's makes me smile because at your defense, you can say, well, quantitative wasn't available. Or you can say, I wanted to do qualitative, but I had these really two nice instruments. I had 10,000 people I could survey. So I had to go quantitative and I had to get some statistics help. Okay. You know, so you have to understand why you're doing one over the other. Remember, again, it can't just be because it's my preference. You've got to be able to demonstrate and show in your problem space or your need for the study why your design method and design have to be that way. And then your designs I didn't include here, but there's different types of course, quantitative. There's different types of design for qualitative. I alluded to it on the qualitative side. So, all right. Just a quick reminder. Who gets really confused, show of hands, on sample? But everybody. I get confused. Dr. Hazy goes, we all get confused. You're going to define your sample. So what you're trying to do is the folks that you're actually sampling, the folks that you're actually doing the study with, should have the same general characteristics, behaviors, whatever you're looking at as your general population. If you were to do the whole general population, it might be a 1 million person study, and you're gonna, it'd just be too overwhelming. So the general population are who you're trying to really understand, the general population. Your target population would be a subsegment of that. And then your full sample are those that participated. Does that make sense? So, and then some universities have thrown in something called a sample frame, which is a little different, and it sits between target population and sample. Who are you going after? What are you doing? And then who did you actually get in your sample? So you're going to want to make sure that you understand these. Now, if you go to layered statistics, it seems to be the go-to site for many universities. LAERD statistics. Even if you're qualitative, you're going to head over there. And if you just Google sample or sampling techniques, all of a sudden what will pop up is the different types of sampling techniques, probability, non-probability. You're going to start hearing these words and what probability is versus non-probability. Many of you in the qualitative realm probably heard of purposive sampling, convenience sampling. In COVID, we're doing a lot of snowball sampling. So you need to make sure that you understand this, because you can get derailed or misaligned by how you describe your general population, your target population, and your sample. So this is another area you have to be an expert in. Most people go, well, doc, what do I do with my general population, target population, and sample? My answer is, because it should be, you tell me.
Yeah.
Okay, that's what my answer should be. And I'll say, go find this resource, go do this thing, and you'll understand now what you're doing here. So this is another area of misalignment.
Dr. Wieters, are you going to be making the slides available later on?
I'm not going to make the slides available, but what I will make available is we're going to edit the video, and we will post the video on the e-dissertation.
We do have a request in the chat. If you could flip back to the quantitative study format for alignment for just a moment. Somebody wants to take a picture of the.
And please feel free to take pictures.
And while you're going back, I actually had a question about that is GCU specific.
Okay.
So the university that I'm going to be sampling from, it's actually the one I teach at in Southern California. And it's hard. So I'm specifically looking at mature age students, and I'm trying to go older because, well, I'm looking for very specific things. We're allowed to use a convenience sample, I'm assuming, And how do they look at snowball sampling? Because again, I don't know how hard it's going to be to get 400 for my smaller university. I don't know if I should just ask in my proposal to do 2 universities, the one I went to and the one I work at. I'm just, especially because they're in 2 different counties, I didn't know how GCU looks at that.
So that's all things you're going to have to explain in your chapter 3 and in your IRB. And of course, you know, you're going through 2 or 3 IRBs if you're doing 2 or 3 universities. So you, most of the time what we're doing now is having learners put in 2 or 3 types of data collection. Or so you might have, or sampling methodology, you might have convenience because they're all in one university and you think you get all that. I mean, if they have 90,000 students, you should be able to get your number if you're quantitative. And I think you probably are if you're statistics professor.
I am.
And then, or you might do 2 universities if you think you have to because of the size. And both of those would be convenience. But then snowball sample could be your plan C, which could be, I'm going to send out to 10 people I know in Southern California who go to those universities and have them send out to people they know who resemble that sample and go to the same university. You just have to be really careful. You might have to put some inclusion criteria in the front of your survey monkey or whatever you're using that says, which university are you going to? Because then if they're not going to either, then they would just exit the survey. So
yeah, well, and I'm doing in-person testing, so that's why I'm trying to front load my questions about sampling so I can make sure I meet the criteria. My sample where I work is it's a very diverse sample.
Okay.
And if I go to the other one, it's very white. So altogether it might be okay, but I just didn't know how it worked with GCU. So okay, you answered my question.
Snowball may not work. If you're doing in person, your snowball may not work unless you get people to invite people in.
That's what I was going to do depending on how my numbers were shaking out, but I didn't know how GCU looked at that.
Yeah, all that has to be defined.
Thank you.
Yep. Chapter 3 is the hardest to finish, just so you know. And then the wheels come off in data collection, just so you know. So that's why.
Time for another question, Dr. Hendricks? Okay, so my methodology, I'm doing a qual study, and my methodologist wanted me to include the whole general population of online doctoral learners, but I talked to Dr. Hazy about this before, and I have written into my study about how that data is extremely hard to get a hold of. And I want my population to be from one university because of all the different things at different universities that have to do with different programs, et cetera, yada, yada. And so what I've done is I've given the best numbers I could get for the whole population, even though my study is not generalizable. And then I'm giving the numbers that I got, but are not necessarily cited numbers, or just numbers people have given me for the university that I'm at. So
that's all work that you have to go through with your chair and methodologist, because they may have different requirements or expectations, and we all report up to someone different. So those are things that you're going to have to come to some sort of general expectation or whatever for. So it's probably right, but your target population is a subsect of your general population. And in a qualitative study, it doesn't have to be as big, because you only have 25, 35 people, depending on if you're doing interviews and focus groups, or if you're doing interviews, and then a subset of those interviewees you're going to use as your focus group, or if you're using a new subset as your focus group. So it just depends. So your whole description about your general population may not be appropriate if you're doing it in the Southwest, because there's more universities in the Northeast or whatever. So you might
Right.
have to narrow it, your general population down to get a smaller target population. Does that make sense?
No, it totally makes sense. I'm in a place where I think a lot of learners get where your methodologist wants one thing, but it doesn't align to you. So you kind of just write it in there because it's what you're told to do. And then you write what makes sense to you and you kind of follow the trail all the way down. You align the dots, so everything kind of lines up. So that's where I'm at.
Yeah, be willing to ask questions. Just be willing to and do it very professionally and go, help me understand. And then if I was to narrow this to this, would this change this conversation? So just as you would in any other business negotiation, it's kind of the same thing. Because you have to have a deep understanding of why you did it. If you go into your defense and I ask you, why did you pick this general population? And you say, because your chair told you to, no, not a good response. Dr. Hazy, anything?
No additional questions right now.
Can we go back to the qualitative alignment slide, please?
That's quantitative. All right,
Oh,
good. I'm going to admit someone else here. All right, you guys are asking really good questions and my favorite response in all this is the same one that I have in business is it depends. There are some structural things that we can say are like this, but there's other things that we're going to say it depends. And as long as you can show it in literature, or as long as you can show that you've done your research around this in some way, then that's good. You should be able to do that. All right, good, everyone, ready, go? Data collection. So quantitative surveys must align and answer your research questions and your hypotheses. We see this a lot when somebody picks a quantitative survey. Like, for example, I had someone pick a resilience survey for kids, but their study was with adults. There's a problem there.
yeah, it is.
So you need to make sure that you have looked at that instrument, you know what it measures, you've sent an email off to the authors to see if they can send you any additional information, or some of those authors can tell you what's being studied today because other people have asked for some of their permission to use their work. So you just want to make sure that you are understanding completely your work that you're doing with these surveys. Make sure your chosen instruments actually measure what you're trying to measure. And then, of course, you'll need permission to use the instruments. Most of these authors are really excited that you're going to be furthering their research. And so they'll want to see probably your structure of what you're trying to do, what variables or other instruments you're trying to pair with them. So these authors typically are very forward in giving you information. I'd like to have you ask for a Zoom call with these folks. Also, you might check YouTube out because a lot of these authors are on YouTube talking about their research and talking about their work. So go out to YouTube and begin to really understand deeply your instruments. Qualitative is a little bit different. Qualitative, in most cases, you can use a validated and a qualitative descriptive. You can use a validated instrument, but you're going to be reporting that out in just some descriptive statistics. You're not going to be doing the inferential statistics on that. But qualitative instruments, questionnaires, the interview questions and focus group questions must be built so they directly align to each one of your research questions. You cannot just ask people why they colored their hair purple. You just can't do that because it's interesting to you, but you want to make sure that you don't. I have all my learners place an appendix page in the back of their dissertation to demonstrate the alignment between these proposed instruments and how they answer your research questions. So it looks like the RQ, and then I might put IQ for interview question and put a couple there. Maybe you're doing a questionnaire, I just put a Q and some questionnaire. So each research question has 3 to 5 ways of gathering data toward it. And if you put it in the back of your proposal, all of a sudden your committee begins to understand what you're trying to accomplish. I have a lot of learners try and put into their research questions interview questions instead of true research questions. And so make sure you make a strong delineation between both. Your instruments in a qualitative study typically will be approved by a panel of experts as a part of the trustworthiness process. So you have to build into your chapter 3 time for you to send your questions and your study components to 3 doctor people. Well, I'm going to say that anybody with a terminal degree can look at it, and then they tell you what changes they'd like to see, what suggestions they might have. You do those changes before you actually do your, I would do that before I would do my field study where you're actually practicing with the instruments. And then for both quant and qual, if you're going to be using an electronic surveying instrument, such as SurveyMonkey or many of the other ones that are out there, you will have to go ahead and build your electronic survey, and then that has to be included with your IRB application. They're going to go out and they want to make sure that your recruitment statement is what you said it would be, your informed consent is there, your demographics that you said you would be collecting and they need to approve are there, as well as the instruments or questionnaires or whatever else you have in those electronic surveying instruments. So they all have to be done. Minimum number of interview questions. Your interview questions, by the way, I don't know if there's any others in there, Dr. Hazy, but minimum number of surveying questions. That's always an interesting question, and I will use the standard, it depends. You have to be able to get to, depending on the design of your study, you have to be able to get to 45 to 60 minutes for a descriptive study, case study, those kinds of shorter studies. You have to get to 45 minutes to an hour of an interview. Now, if you're a really good interviewer and you have one interview question and several sub questions, then maybe you can use 10, 8, 10. You have to have some that answer each research question, so it's really hard to tell you for sure. But I like a regular question. So if you look at, you can Google, by the way, this is my new little area, but you can Google in types of interview questions. And there's an author out there, and I'll have to get that for you. But there's an author there that talks about 3 different levels of questions. Came out in like 2006. There are grand view questions or grand tour questions where it's like a grand tour. Tell me how burnout influences your ability to serve your customers. And then they're just going to talk and talk and talk and talk. And if you can do that, that's called a grand tour question. The second layer of questions is an example questions. Many of the folks that are, the literature shows where counselors are having high levels of burnout. Tell me how that statement reflects what you're experiencing in your counseling process, whatever, in where burnout is concerned. That's an example question. And then there's probe questions, which are, or prompting questions, where you prompt them. Well, tell me more about that. Give me more information there. If they give you a really short answer, you may have to have another 2 or 3 questions underneath that. So all of the folks I chair right now are using those 3 layers of questions when they build their interview guide. Hopefully that helps.
Dr. Readers, that question was actually subsequent to a previous question, which was similar, but it said how many are too many questions?
Yeah, you know, if you're doing a narrative where you're going to have at least 2 hours, 90 minutes to 2 hours of interviews, too many questions means you're not allowing them to talk. So you want to have a balance. I would say if you had 10 solid questions with 2 or 3, either the example questions or prompt questions would be plenty to get you to that 45 minutes to an hour. And then of course, if you're doing a narrative or you're doing a different type of design in qualitative, you're going to want to have much more or a lot of bigger questions that allows that person to talk and talk and talk.
A bit before that, Sabrina had asked, where actually it said she'd like to know a little bit more about the alignment of theory and instruments in quantitative research. And Sabrina, I don't know if you can elaborate a little bit on that question so that we can help you.
So I found instruments and theories for authentic leadership, as well as the social exchange theory for organizational citizenship behavior. And for authentic leadership, there were quite a few different there was one theory, but I found I think two different instruments. So just trying to find out which one is the right one, or is there a right or wrong one to use. I want to make sure that I have, the right instrument to align with it properly. And then also my third variable was a leader's emotional intelligence. And emotional intelligence has so many different instruments. And so I just want to, just trying to understand better how to select the right one for the right theory.
So there's no right one, it's the one you choose and the one that you can show that's been used and validated a lot. So if I'm going to say, if you look and see one person created one and they've been cited by 3 people, that's not your actual survey that you need to use. I would go with one that's been proven and used a lot and more research needs to be done on using it.
Okay.
So there's not one good answer. Dr. Hazy?
One piece of advice I can give there, because Dr. Readers mentioned resilience earlier, and I'm familiar with that psychological construct, and there are several instruments for measuring resilience. Look for a meta-analysis on your particular topic, which will probably give you a good spectrum of what the available instrumentation might be for a particular topic. And they'll often include how frequently they're used. And that might give you a sense of how old or new a particular instrument is and how often it's used in the literature. So look for a meta-analysis that might help you out.
Okay, thanks so much.
And Google that. Authentic leadership theory meta-analysis, just general Google. Don't worry about Scholar or the library. And then you'll go out and then the meta-analysis will come up. And the beauty of what Dr. Hazy just said is that it may have been done in 2018. So you've got all current literature now on that area. And the other thing I'd just like to invite you to do is in quantitative, when you're doing 3 things, 3 large bucket items like you're doing, it's too much. So I would invite you to go out and really look at the literature and see if it's requiring you to use 3, or if you can just get away with 2. Authentic leadership and emotional intelligence is huge. And then you had a third one, right?
Organizational citizenship behavior.
Oh, you've got a study that's going to take you 5 years to complete.
Oh,
So I don't know where you're at in the process, but you might think about narrowing it to 2, unless your literature says that you need to have authentic leadership, organizational citizenship as mediated and moderated with emotional intelligence. But your chapter 2 goes from 30 pages to 60 pages pretty quick.
okay. So the emotional intelligence of a leader would be the moderator in this study.
But it's still chapter 2, you
Still,
have to unpack all 3 of those theories.
okay.
So that
Right.
means that your review of literature goes from 30 to 60 pages pretty quick.
Yeah, that doesn't sound exciting.
I know it's going to add probably another 6 months to 8 months to your process. Will it be easy to send a survey out and get stuff back? And not easy, but it'd be, I shouldn't ever say easy, but it would be in that process, sending it out and getting it back would be the good part. But writing chapter 2, you have to think about, everyone needs to think about chapter 2 being a historical view of your problem, and then why your sample needs to be studied. But then you have to take each one of your theoretical foundations and really show deeply how others have studied each one of those constructs. And pretty soon you're at a lot of pages. And then you're going to fall off the GCU conveyor belt, because we like to review 30 pages in your review of lit.
Right.
And another thing to keep in mind when you do something that's that broad and you're doing a survey and you're concatenating multiple instruments, when your potential participant logs into SurveyMonkey and they see you want the answer to 68 questions, some of them will log right back out. You need to keep the amount of time that you are asking somebody to participate down to a reasonable minimum. And if you have multiple instruments and you have a lot of questions as a result, you're going to lose people, and you don't want that either.
Okay. That's definitely some things to work on. So thank you so much.
You get into, you have to address then in your chapter 3 survey fatigue and a few other things when you are past like the 10-minute mark. So just be really careful as you're picking things and as you're looking at things, thinking all the way through that. Thank you, Dr. Measy, for that.
We have one more question pop up, Dr. Wieters. Okay. In qualitative, what is the minimum number of theories required?
One minimum. I would do 2 max. I would compare not compare. I would look at the comparing, by the way, as quantitative. See, I even do it. But you're looking at the influence of one thing on another. So you want to make sure that 2 is good, depending on what you're trying to accomplish and what the literature says. Study fatigue is real. Wow. All right, I need to move forward here. We have 7 minutes, 6 minutes now. Quantitative is another area, data analysis is another area where you can get misaligned. You want to make sure that your statistical testing with your proposed questions and hypotheses is right. You could have different tests for some of your questions, and then you want to use layered statistics to help you determine the alignment of your testing. Stick your variables in, you can answer some questions, and then all of a sudden it'll pop out the testing that you need to do. Make sure that's aligned. Chapter 3, most people do really well in the top part of chapter 3, but then when it gets into really data collection, data analysis, misalignment begins to occur. In qualitative, your questionnaire has to have some open-ended questions, and those you're going to use more deductive, inductive, or both thematic analysis. Closed-ended questions might use descriptive statistics. So a questionnaire might have 2 levels of data analysis. Semi-structured interviews and focus groups, same thing. You're usually use some sort of thematic analysis. There's deductive, inductive, or both. You might have heard the words Braun and Clark as a 6-step thematic analysis that a lot of folks are using. Faraday's another one, F-E-R-E-D-A-Y. Braun and Clark are more inductive or emergent, what's coming out of my transcripts and my interviews or my focus groups. And then Faraday's starts with create a code book of predetermined codes out of your theory and out of your literature. So please ask your chair and make sure you understand thematic analysis. There's a ton of videos on YouTube. It's not about us telling you how to do it. It's about you determining what's best for your study. And then if you're doing other types of design, you might have observations, character mappings used in narrative, timelining, maybe other methods. So there's just a variety of things that you can do in the data analysis space that helps you with alignment. This is all things you will learn in residency, by the way, if anybody's headed that way. Okay, let's just quickly look at the power of drawing out your study. I wanted to bring this in. This is one of my learners who's doing a study on EO is entrepreneurial orientation. And so RQ1, well, the problem statement, let's start on the right. It's not known if and to what degree. There's a difference in entrepreneurial orientation between charter principals, school principals, and public school principals. You can see his purpose statement is aligned, and the language is a little bit different than a quantitative correlation. And then you look at the 2 questions we have here, and we could have 4 questions, 1 for each subscale. For in this case, we did 2. If and to what degree is there a difference in entrepreneurial orientation between charter school? This is a comparison study where we have 2 groups, and this is quantitative in nature. And then we have the population target sample at the bottom, data collection down there, and then data analysis. So in 1 page, he's got his study drawn. And then what I had him do is tape this next to his computer so that he can constantly look at what he's trying to do. And so as he gets into that Alice in Wonderland, going down under the tree and really going into 15 other directions, that he comes back to this and says, this is my study. This is how narrow it is. And these are the things that I'm doing. So drawing out your study is huge for you to keep on track and where you need to be. So that's just a good example of a different type of quantitative study. Now, if you have 2 variables that are overlapping, you might do a little Venn diagram of 2 circles overlapping, authentic leadership and organizational citizenship. And your study is in the overlap. That's where your need for this study comes and that kind of stuff. So you can draw anything you want so that now you have a picture of the alignment of your study. Oh, we have like 3 minutes. I'm running out of time here. So fixing the alignment, if you can stay, please stay for just a few minutes longer. But, anybody want to try this? This is a qualitative study. Problem stating it's not known how elementary school teachers describe the use of trust-based relational intervention principles in an academic setting. The theory is to the left. What do you notice about the theory right off the bat? Anybody have any ideas what they notice about the theoretical foundation on the left?
Okay, is it mark theory? I mean, I'm seeing empowering principles, fix
Yeah.
the alignment. Okay.
It's the trust-based relational intervention, interactive empowering principles, connecting principles, and correcting principles theory. Does it look huge to you, like big, a lot to do?
It looks
Yes.
like a monster.
Overwhelming.
Yeah, Dr. Reader's, the first thing that I'm noticing is it's really looking through multiple lenses. It's looking
Yeah,
through
it's too much.
ecology and physiology, which, yeah, to me makes it a little bit overwhelming.
Yeah. So the learner wanted to use it, and so we built out the research questions on each one of the layers, so empowering principles. And so as she asks her questions, she'll be coding against ecological, physiological inner questions. Connecting principles are the second one. And so she's going to ask those wide sweeping questions about, tell me how all the teachers have gone through this trust-based relational intervention principles. So she's going to ask some wide sweeping questions about trust-based interventions. How are you applying this training that you've had in the classroom? And they're going to give her a bunch of information, and she's going to be able to come back out and code using these descriptors and things that are here. But it's just a lot, but this is what she wants to do post. She's a consultant and wants to keep furthering this process. So
So I have a question about her research questions. She has 4 questions, but there are 3 main principles.
yeah, the first one is a restatement of the problem statement. So remember, that's the area that catches anything that's not included in any of these. If they say, for example, it might catch, everyone says bringing a support animal to school helps the children. Well, that's not really in any of these areas, so she'd be able to report that through question 1. It's just the way that Grand Canyon University does it, and that can be labeled as RQ0 or RQ1. But I said right or wrong, they've got the wrong language in here, and you can see that. So make sure you note that. Like, the purpose of this qualitative script is to examine. Well, this is a qualitative study, so it should be explore. So there's some things that are wrong here from an alignment perspective. So don't take this photo and say, I'm going to do it this way. Make sure you know that this one has some alignment issues. It was designed to be your last test. Not that I'm testing. All right. One last thing, and then we'll let you go for the day. I need for you to look at your own studies, really examine them very closely. And remember, at the end of the day, the best dissertation is a done dissertation. You don't have to solve world peace. You just have to demonstrate that you can do scholarly work. And the last one is any questions and takeaways.
I just want to say thank you very much. Informative. I'm very new to the doctoral program, so this has been very enlightening in so many aspects. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
When are we doing the picture?
Do me a favor, and in the chat feature, we're going to capture the chat. Dr. Hazy and I will post any kind of takeaways you had, anything, other seminars you'd like to see. If you just take a minute to do that for us, if this seminar was helpful. We're going to start offering Zoom calls and seminars or something. I know Dr. Lopez did one on coding, and so we have lots of expertise that we can bring to the table. So as you have those, let us know, and we'll go ahead and start making sure that we are continue to meet your needs through the Dissertation Collaborative.
Thank you.
All right.
This is very helpful.
Thank you so much. Dr. Hazy, any final thoughts? Thank you, by the way, for helping me today.
This was fun. I really enjoyed the presentation myself. There's a lot of good information.
And thank you all for staying on a couple minutes late. I appreciate every one of you. Have a fantastic, I'm going to shut the recording off, but have an absolutely fantastic rest of the week.